Hello everyone and welcome back to Attorneys React, where all your favorite attorneys react to everything that's happening in our crazy world of ours. Today we turn our attention to the recently concluded YNW Melly murder trial. YNW Melly was on trial for a double murder in relation to a supposed drive-by shooting. But this murder trial came to a hung verdict. The jury was unable to reach a conclusion, and so the jury declared that they were unable to finish, and so the judge then declared a mistrial. So this case may be tried again. But as we look for reasons that the jury may have been unable to convict, we want to turn our attention to one particular moment that shows us the power of YNW Melly's attorneys. This is the cross-examination of the lead detective, where YNW Melly shows some flaws in what the witnesses reported and shows some of the reasons that perhaps the jury might have been unable to reach the conclusion of guilt.
And speak to Cortland Henry, correct?
Yes, sir.
And we listened to the tape of Mr. Henry.
Yes, sir.
Who told you that there were 3 people in his car, correct?
Yes, sir.
Cortland Henry, the driver, correct?
Yes.
Christopher and, well, let me get in the right order. In the front passenger seat was Anthony Williams.
Yes.
And sitting in the rear passenger seat was Christopher Thomas.
Yes.
Only those 3 people when the shooting occurred, correct?
Correct.
You learned that he lied to you about where the drive-by shooting was, correct?
Yes.
You learned at that time that at first he was labeled a victim, but that he now is lying to the police concerning the shooting of 2 individuals.
He was still listed as a victim that day, even though we knew he was lying to us, but he was still considered a victim at that point.
All right, so we got some really good testimony right from the start from YNW Melly's lawyer. We got the admission from the detective that one of the witnesses is a liar. So that's a real problem, right? You have a person who's reporting a crime has occurred and they are lying. Now, there might be a whole bunch of reasons that they are not telling the truth. Now, if a person's not telling the truth, it could be because they're mistaken or confused, which in the aftermath of a serious shooting, of course, could certainly be a thing. In fact, if a person tells you a perfect story, if someone's able to recall exactly what happened, it's often a sign that they're lying or fabricating it because they made it up, so they know everything and they know it in the right order. It's much more common for victims of crime to remember things or remember things wrongly, remember them in the wrong order, be jumbled up and things like that. So first of all, you have to distinguish between it being merely false and being a lie. Of course, the difference being that when you're telling a lie, it's that you know that you're telling a falsehood as opposed to merely mistaken. So first of all, we got the idea that this person is telling falsehoods. But now we've got the more important concession that this person is actually lying from the detective. This is a witness, supposedly to the crime, but they are telling outright fabrications. Again, there could be a whole bunch of reasons that's true, right? The witness could in fact be a victim to the crime and telling falsehoods because they were behaving in some sort of unlawful way, or they want to make the guy look more guilty, or they want to, correct for some sort of problem they see. So there might be reasons that a person might lie, even if they are a victim of a crime, but when they're lying, it certainly goes to their credibility and something the jury needs to be aware of.
There is such a crime as lying to the police.
Yes, sir. It's a misdemeanor.
You could have arrested him if you so chose for lying to the police, correct?
You're saying I should arrest a potential victim of a violent crime on a misdemeanor?
Could you just answer my question? Could you have arrested him, yes or no?
Yes.
And he gave you the address where he lives, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he tells you also that Melly lives there, correct?
Yes.
He tells you Anthony Williams, one of the victims, lives there.
Yes.
He tells you Christopher Thomas, the other victim, lives there, correct?
Correct.
And he also tells you that Melly is a recording artist, correct?
Yes.
2 victims, the driver of the car that lied to you, and Melly lived, and you had the address at the same house.
Yes.
You also learned about that time, and you mentioned it briefly, that a text message came out from a crucial almighty. And that text message was, we were just aiming at YNW. Correct?
Yes, sir.
And it had a picture of him with a target. Correct?
Yes, sir.
So it would be fair to say Crucial Almighty was suspect number 1 based upon that.
It was a person of interest. It was something to look at.
That's a little disingenuous. A person of interest. I'm sure he's a person of very strong interest. You know, with the we aimed guns at them with his picture with a target on it. Yeah, it might be suggestive of a murderous conspiracy murder plot there. So yeah, he's a person of interest. Yeah, it's a little clever by half. I'm not sure why the detective's trying to buy this back a little bit at this point, but fine.
When did you decide to talk to the David Crucial Almighty, who said he shot at this young man inside a Jeep? What day?
I first did a search warrant into his social media account where the comments came from, which then being able to determine a better picture of Mr. Hedgepeth was probably maybe 2 years later when we interviewed Mr. Hedgepeth.
2 years later.
Ooh, 2 years later. Ooh, geez, that's a long time, my friend. You had this very strong information that this guy was behind a murderous conspiracy. Now, I totally understand the idea of getting other information in advance. It is very typically true, although not, of course, always true, that the last step is sort of interviewing the guy just before you arrest him, especially because you want to have all your ducks in a row. You can confront him with any lies. If he tells lies, you have information to confront his lies. You have evidence to show him, to get him to confess. And if he doesn't confess, of course, then you don't tip him off, right? So that you're ready to make the arrest and you're ready to go forth. So it is very typically true, although not always true, that you're sort of your last step along the way is to talk to the guy. So would it take a couple days? Sure. Might it take a couple weeks? Yeah, I guess maybe, depending on what you're doing and the nature of the thing. 2 years is a very long time from, okay, we were aiming guns at this person, trying to take him out. Here's a picture with a target of him. And 2 years later, it took us to interview the guy. Wow. How long did it take you to do this search warrants relating to his social media? What were you doing for 2 years, man? Yikes.
Real quick, I just wanted to say that Attorney Tom / Attorney Reacts content is now on Spotify. We just launched a partnered show, link in the description. Go check it out. Now, back to the video.
And you interviewed him after the case was closed, correct? Because it was closed at the time of the arrest.
Yes.
Of Melly, correct?
Yes, sir.
You interviewed a person of strong interest in the case after the case was completely closed. Seems like you might have overlooked a pretty viable avenue of investigation if you didn't at least try to talk to the guy at some point. Not sure what that's all about. Okay.
You also learned from Cortland Henry that they were having a problem with a guy named Bentley.
Yes.
Who is Bentley?
Never could identify.
So last name unknown.
Correct.
You also learned that there was a problem at Walmart where they got jumped and I think a necklace or a bracelet was stolen.
A little pendant fell off one of them, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Did
That's
you
assault.
go to Walmart to investigate that?
No, sir.
Why would you not do that? Because it seems like this might be part of an escalation, right? That things are escalating in hostility, right? So the person who's involved in this thing at this Walmart might be one and the same as the person who was involved in the later shooting, because maybe it was part of a escalating feud with somebody. So you might want to go look into that and be like, hey, what's that all about? Or, you know, that someone is just inherently violent, or there's other problems there. It might be a clue, but you didn't look into it at all. It looks like you left off quite a few steps of the breadcrumb trail. I don't know why.
And I'm going to just label him Walmart with a question. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Did you bother to go and attempt to pull the surveillance of Walmart because they keep their tapes for a while?
Not a while, sir, but usually about 30 days.
Did you go to Walmart to attempt to see if it even didn't exist?
No, sir.
Now, you then, during October 26th, get the surveillance tape of the people coming out of the recording studio, correct?
On which date, sir?
The 26th.
Yes, sir.
All 8 people that left the recording studio, all 8 of them were living, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you had observed the bloody scene of inside the Jeep, correct?
Correct.
And you knew that Cortland Henry had lied to you.
Correct.
So you certainly, at that point, obtained a search warrant to look at that house to see if you could find any blood, any gun, or anything to tie up what happened in that car, correct?
There is no way we could have got a search warrant for that house because there was no nexus to the crime to the house. And I have to establish a nexus between the two, or the judges will not sign the warrant.
Did you even try, sir, to get a search warrant and go in front of a judge and say, I got 8 people who left the studio. They all live in the same house. The driver of the vehicle we interviewed lied, and the inside of the Jeep is covered in blood. And we're looking for the gun or guns and the bloody clothes involved in this. Did you bother to do that, sir?
So like I said before, there was no connection between the house and the crime itself. Now,
The answer-
where we had blood, where we had evidence, where we had instruments of a crime, we did search warrants. Anytime we had a nexus between the two, we did a search warrant. We never had a nexus between the two. We even went to that house that day, knocked on the door, there was no one there.
Yeah, I disagree with the officer here. He says there's no nexus between the house and the crime, which I suppose in some sense is strictly true, but there's a nexus between the people that live in the house and the crime, right? 2 of the people who are involved in the crime are dead, lived at the house. 1 of the people who testified falsely is at the house. The Jeep is associated with the house. So we are going to look for the guns and clothing from these individuals, which we have a reasonable expectation is the guns and clothes are at the house because that's where they live. I think judge there's a pretty good chance the judge would sign off on that search warrant. I have to tell you, he's like, there's no nexus between it. I've seen judges sign off on a lot less secure stuff than this. Really? You didn't think a judge would secure this search warrant? I'm dubious, sir. I'm very dubious. I think a judge would have signed off on it. Yeah.
Did you get a search warrant of the house in November at all?
You mean for which house?
The house where Melly lived.
No, sir.
How about December?
They were already gone at that point.
You could have looked for blood, traces of blood, because we saw that you sprayed this agent on things, and miraculously blood surfaces. You know that.
Yes, sir.
Did you do that?
No, sir.
Seems a little shoddy, sir. Well, my friends, that brings us to the end of this video, and wow, there seems to be quite a little bit of oversights here in the investigation of this double murder Police don't seem particularly curious about the fact that one of their chief witnesses lied and seems to be directly tied to have motives for potentially being involved in the shooting, and don't seem to want to investigate this or ask them questions for 2 years. Don't seem to want to get a search warrant for the house where apparently everyone lives and to search for blood or clothes or something like that. The detectives over here like, I couldn't get a search warrant, and I'm over here like, no, I think you probably could. There is no direct connection between the house and the crime, I suppose, but there's a lot of tie between the people and the house, where we might find clothes and guns and other accoutrements of the crime. So, and we didn't look into the Walmart thing. We didn't try to find the tape. We didn't do search warrants. We didn't talk to the people. Seems like we let a lot of investigative hooks unresolved for no reason whatsoever. So, some problems and bungling around for sure. So, yeah, I'm beginning to sense some of the reasons the jury might have hung and been unable to come to a decision. But in any case, what we saw here was some really good luring, really good questions, really good control of the witness, really good, sharp, direct, short questions, getting what he needed, gets in, gets out, gets what he wants. Who doesn't love it? I've been on Civil Law. I've been for Attorneys React. Until later, my friends, keep legal out there. I hope everyone has a great day. Bye-bye.
Big verdict.